Daredevil Season 1 is incredible. Netflix took the IP and created their own unique universe, a gritty, realistic take on a very simple yet complicated character. At the time, Daredevil was a name that was dwindling in popularity as it had been 12 years since the release of his own movie starring Ben Affleck, and we all know how that turned out.
Got work to do.
I'm really compelled by this series, and I love talking about it, so let's just jump into it.
It begins with something is not right with the world. Something is going on. There's an underground terror that is causing mayhem within the city.
Welcome back to the watch list. Today we're looking at my favourite Marvel property, Daredevil, Season 1. As usual, if you find these videos any way insightful or interesting, leave a like and possibly subscribe. I'm currently reviewing most of Marvel's movies and TV shows leading up to Doomsday, in release order, so feel free to tag along and join me in this journey. What I find interesting about Daredevil Season 1 is how it's nothing like any superhero property we had at the time, except for maybe Captain America the Winter Soldier, which went down a very similar road in terms of its themes and cinematography. Now that I think about it, it makes me wonder what a Daredevil film directed by the Russo brothers would be like. Well, this series was created by Drew Goddard, and he wrote the first 2 episodes. However, Goddard stepped down from this position early on in development as he was focusing on directing a Sinister Six movie for Sony Pictures, which obviously never even saw the light of day. He stayed on though as a consultant and executive producer for the series, and his old position was commandeered by Stephen S. DeKnight, known for directing episodes of Angel and Smallville. We get a few different directors throughout the season. Some notable are Phil Abraham, known for shows like Mad Men and Ozark, Steven Surgic, known for The Witcher and The Umbrella Academy, with DeKnight directing the final episode. I think the writing needs a lot of attention here, as it's what made this series so profoundly immersive. And it's the main reason as to why the Defenders series felt like its own universe. The writing helped lift the story in a way that felt so rich and juicy that entering a new episode felt like you were being rewarded. Writing is something that's so overlooked in most recent MCU projects.
Come on now, dawg. Come on, man.
And if you've noticed like I have, the MCU recently doesn't feel like it's gone anywhere story-wise. And that's because they aren't focusing on the writing. Good writing goes a long way. Similar to the script, the structure is just as important. It needs to feel like the story isn't one long, exhausting chore to get through, but paced perfectly for the audience to want more. And wouldn't you know, Daredevil does it excellently, particularly when we see flashbacks to his childhood and origins of the character. I typically don't enjoy flashbacks, as it stalls the story in a lot of different films and TV shows I've seen. However, because it's so important for Matt Murdock's character, it creates more empathy and understanding of the way he is. 13 episodes is a lot, and I remember it being tough to get through the first time around because when I first watched this I must have been 14 or so. But now rewatching it, I'm thankful that there are that many episodes, especially when I found out it was cancelled and that we may not get Charlie Cox's depiction of the character again. But luckily we did, and I'm so glad because Charlie Cox smashes it at playing Matt Murdock. Not only does he capture Matt's blindness well on camera, but other aspects of his character as well, such as his religious beliefs, his stance on the law and what his morals align with when it comes to being a vigilante. These are battles that Matt has to face throughout the series, and the way Charlie shows that just brings this character into a whole new light. More actors that shine a new light on their characters are Deborah Ann Wolf and Eldon Hansen, who played Karen Page and Foggy Nelson. Again, just perfection. Foggy is the perfect sidekick for Matt. He's loyal, he's caring, he doesn't want to see his friend become something he knows he doesn't want to be. Karen is equally just as caring towards Matt, but she's a tad more courageous, finding ways to fight back against Fisk using her journalistic skills. They expand on these characters in a way that delves deep into their lives and makes you understand them in a way that hasn't even been done before. It makes you realize that even the smallest of roles can elevate a story to new heights. Now let's talk about a big role, a very big role, Kingpin, or more specifically Wilson Fisk, as his reign to Kingpin is just on the cusp. He's menacing and truly scary. I think he's the most spine-chilling villain because of how real he is. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's someone out there that's just as corrupt and controlling as he is. He's just the worst. And not to mention absolutely brutal. That nicely leads us to the action. There's a lot of brutality in this series, because it's supposed to feel raw and gritty. It's what differentiates this series from the usual Marvel stuff. The fighting scenes are the standout of the show, focusing on Daredevil's powers and Matt's physical strength. He uses different fighting styles like Filipino martial arts, specifically Kali, Eskrima, and Arnis. He also uses Wing Chun Kung Fu, and lots of boxing, as he learnt this from his father, who was a well-known boxer by the name of Battling Jack. The best action scene for me has to be the hallway fight. It becomes an iconic sequence in the show. What's even more interesting is that it was shot in one take. You can see how exhausted the actors are at the end of it, and again, just adds to the realism. Okay, moving on to the trivia section, with some references to the MCU and production facts. In Ben Urich's office, there are two newspaper clippings on the wall, one saying Harlem Terror and the other Battle of New York, a reference to the events of the Incredible Hulk and the Avengers. It's mentioned in the show that Matt grew up in St. Agnes's orphanage. Skye from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. also stated that she grew up in St. Agnes's orphanage. There's actually a lot of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. references in this show. Michael C. Hall was rumoured to play Daredevil, but thankfully they landed on Charlie Cox. Stan Lee gets a small cameo in this, with a photo of him appearing in the police department. And finally, Charlie Cox was initially considered for Foggy Nelson, but he declined this and insisted on auditioning for Matt Murdock. In my eyes, this is an outstanding piece of media. It gets everything about the character of Daredevil right. Yes, this season also has its flaws, while many perfect adaptations do, but it does this character justice, and revealed to many, including me, how immersive Matt Murdock and his fellow comic-based characters can be. The themes that run throughout this season are the reason this show is remarkable. Morality, justice, corruption, and religion, all perfectly interwoven. These themes, along with brilliant casting and its existential writing, are the reason this series is so compelling and influential.